Hello, back again on the Top Recap channel. This time I will tell a movie's entitled Bull. Let's get straight into the storyline. The film opens with a haunting scene. 3 men in a quiet, remote field, digging a grave. We never see the body clearly, but one disturbing detail stands out. It's on fire as they bury it. Cut to a man named Bull, sitting in a parked car, calmly loading a gun. The driver, curious about Bull's long absence, asks where he's been for the past 10 years. Bull answers with a single chilling word, hell. They arrive at a small shop. Bull steps out, walks in, and without hesitation, shoots a man dead. He then casually tosses the gun back into the car and tells the driver not to worry, as if nothing out of the ordinary just happened. Later, Bull is seen alone in a park. He's hit with a memory. His young son, Aiden, once played joyfully with him here. The flashback leaves Bull visibly shaken, his face filled with grief and longing. Overcome with emotion, he storms away from the park. It becomes clear that Bull is no ordinary man. He's on a relentless mission of vengeance, hunting down the people who betrayed him and tried to kill him. One by one, he begins targeting them. His first stop is Cheryl, the aunt of his ex-wife. Bull corners her at home, demanding to know Aiden's whereabouts. Cheryl refuses to speak, which sends Bull into a violent rage. He murders both Cheryl and her husband, showing just how far he's willing to go to find his son and settle old scores.
There.
News of the double murder quickly reaches Gary, a man working in a local shop. Stunned, he contacts Norm, the leader of a criminal gang. Their conversation reveals that Norm is Bull's former father-in-law, and Cheryl was Norm's daughter, raising the stakes on a deeply personal level. Gary visits Sharon, Cheryl's sister, who is devastated by the tragedy. When Norm arrives, Sharon breaks down completely, pleading with him to stop Bull and get justice for her family. Meanwhile, Bull approaches a young boy named Adam and instructs him to call his father, Marco. When Marco finds out Bull is looking for him, he panics and calls Norm for help. Norm advises him to come immediately, but it's too late. Bull is already waiting. Bull confronts Marco, demanding answers about Aiden. Terrified, Marco claims he was only following orders, but Bull isn't interested in excuses. Enraged, he kills Marco without mercy. A flashback takes us back 10 years. Norm was then the head of a powerful criminal operation, and Bull was part of his crew. During a family gathering, Bull is seen with his wife Gemma and their son Aiden. Everything seems normal, until Norm pulls Bull aside and says they have unfinished business. They leave the party and head to a rundown slaughterhouse, where Norm confronts the factory owner who owes him money. When the owner refuses to pay, Bull takes matters into his own hands, violently slicing off the man's finger until he gives in and signs over the factory. Afterward, something gnaws at Bull. He asks about Gary, who had lent money to the factory owner and should have been involved in the shakedown. Norm and the others avoid the question, hinting at something they're hiding. When Bull returns home, he finds Gary's car in the driveway. Inside, he discovers a painful truth. Gary is having an affair with Gemma, Bull's wife. Shocked but silent, Bull walks past her and into Aiden's room, choosing, for now, not to confront the betrayal. His heart broken, Bull says nothing, out of respect for Norm, Gemma's father. He keeps the affair to himself, swallowing his pride to protect the family. Back in the present, Norm and Gary realize that Bull is alive and hunting them. They visit Bull's mother, Marge, demanding to know where he's hiding. Despite her frail condition, Marge denies knowing anything. Norm threatens her, but she remains silent. Watching from a distance, Bull has seen everything. After Norm and Gary leave, he enters his mother's home and gently speaks to her. Understanding her pain, Bull makes a heartbreaking decision. He smothers her, putting her out of her misery. Another flashback shows Bull's growing despair. Betrayed by his wife and best friend, he throws himself into being a father to Aiden, the only thing that gives his life meaning. Then, Norm delivers another blow. He tells Bull that since Gemma is now with Gary, Bull is out of the crew. Bull doesn't react. He admits he's known about the affair for a long time, but kept quiet for Norm's sake. He agrees to step away but demands one thing: custody of Aiden. Norm refuses, claiming Bull is unfit to raise him. That rejection is the breaking point. Bull leaves, furious that even his role as a father is being stripped away. The next day, Driven by raw emotion, Bull impulsively takes Aiden back to their old home. Despite his brutal violence toward his enemies, his love for his son is deep and unwavering. He's desperately trying to reconnect, clinging to the only thing that still matters to him. Later that day, Marco and Mike, former members of Bull's old crew, arrive at the house. They've been sent by Norm with a message. Norm wants Bull and Aiden to join him at a local amusement park. Bull is skeptical and hesitant. He wants nothing more to do with Norm or the gang. Marco assures him it's nothing more than a peaceful farewell, a friendly goodbye. Reluctantly, Bull agrees, and they head to the park. At the amusement park, Bull does his best to enjoy the day, playing games with Aiden, riding attractions, laughing when he can. For a brief moment, it almost feels like normal life. Bull allows himself to be present, trying to forget the betrayals and violence that brought him here. But the peace doesn't last. Eventually, Norm approaches Bull, and Bull immediately senses something isn't right. Norm tells Marco and Mike to take Aiden away for another ride, giving him and Bull a moment alone. Once Aiden is out of sight, Norm drops the act. His smile disappears. He pulls out a gun and forces Bull to walk with him toward the parking lot, where Gary is waiting. Enraged, Bull lashes out at Gary, hurling insults and calling Gemma, Gary's lover and Bull's ex-wife, a disloyal woman who would betray any man. Infuriated by the disrespect toward his daughter, Norm strikes Bull in the head with his gun, knocking him down. Dazed and disoriented, Bull is shoved into the trunk of a car. He realizes, too late, that the farewell was a trap. The story cuts back to the present. Clive spots Bull waiting for him, seated ominously in a car. Bull, cold and menacing, orders Clive to get in. Terrified and without options, Clive obeys. Inside, Bull keeps up appearances for Clive's children, telling them they're heading to a fun fair. But under the surface, tension simmers. As they drive, Bull questions Clive about Gemma. Clive insists he knows nothing and suggests Bull speak to Gary instead. Taking the hint, Bull forces Clive to call Gary and arrange a meeting at the amusement park. When Gary arrives, Bull lets Clive and his children leave unharmed. The focus shifts to Gary, now completely at Bull's mercy. Bull forces him onto one of the park rides and holds a knife to his leg. As the ride spins, the interrogation begins. Bull demands to know where Gemma is. Panicked, Gary confesses Gemma left him. She's now living in Camford. Bull, unmoved by the confession, slashes Gary's leg, leaving him bleeding out on the ride, coldly walking away. Next, Bull heads to a club in Camford, determined to find Gemma. Inside, he zeroes in on a drug dealer and immediately attacks. He beats the man brutally, demanding to know who the top dealer in town is. Fearing for his life, the man brings Bull to his flat. Pretending to be a buyer, Bull waits until the man lowers his guard, then strikes. He slices the dealer's hand, and in a gruesome act, amputates his arm. Still not finished, Bull cauterizes the wound on the stove, keeping the man alive but in horrific pain. Then, in his most threatening voice, Bull demands to know where Gemma is. Shattered, the dealer agrees to take him to her. Bull arrives at Gemma's home, finding her asleep on the couch. He bursts in, yelling. Gemma wakes up, screams in terror, and realizes Bull is standing in her living room. A flashback reveals the moment, years ago, when Norm and his crew took Bull to a remote location. Gemma arrived soon after, furious that Bull had taken Aiden without permission. She attacked him in rage. Back in the present, Bull, now seething, demands Gemma call Norm and lie. Tell him Bull is asleep in the car outside. Shaking, she complies. After the call, Bull gags her and ties her up, ensuring she can't interfere. We return to the past again, to a van filled with Norm, Bull, and other gang members. Norm asks Bull what he'd do if someone tried to take Aiden from him. Calm but deadly, Bull answers he'd destroy them. That moment makes Norm realize Bull is a threat, even to him. So Norm devises a plan. As the group travels by bus, they get Bull drunk, waiting until he passes out. Then they douse the bus with gasoline, drag Bull inside, and set it ablaze, leaving him to burn. Flames engulf the bus. In the distance, Aiden watches from Gemma's car, horrified. He breaks free and runs toward the inferno, screaming for his father. Gemma grabs him and pulls him back. In the present, Norm enters Gemma's house, unaware Bull is inside. Bull ambushes him with a knife and pins him down. Furious, Bull demands to know where Aiden is. Norm refuses. Bull begins to suffocate him with a pillow. Gemma pleads for his life, but Bull doesn't stop. Finally, Gemma cracks and tells Bull the truth. Aiden is living under a bridge. Bull screams Aiden's name as the truth sinks in. Realizing both Norm and Gemma abandoned their own child, Bull snaps. He kills Norm. Then, in a final act of fury, he kills Gemma. That night, Bull finds Aiden sleeping under the bridge. He gently carries his son to a nearby church. The next morning, Molly, the local vicar, arrives and is stunned to see Bull, alive, after all these years. She finds Aiden unconscious on the floor and Bull standing nearby, cloaked in shadow. Bull tells her he hasn't come for forgiveness, but for Aiden. He's not seeking redemption for himself, only a future for his son. Molly sees the pain and emptiness in his eyes. This isn't the same man she once knew. The man before her has been hollowed out by betrayal, vengeance, and grief. Before disappearing into the night, Bull begs Molly to protect Aiden. He knows there's no place left for him in this world. But if Aiden is safe, then perhaps all of this has meant something.